You see, the avoidance' greatest weapon isn't their silence. It isn't their distance. It isn't even their coldness. Their greatest weapon is their ego. That ego is a fortress, a thick wall built around their heart to convince themselves they don't need anyone. They wear it like armor. They hide behind it. And here's the shocking truth. You don't break through that armor by pounding harder, by chasing, by demanding love. You break it by doing the very thing they never expected. You stop feeding it. You starve their ego of the one thing it thrives on, your pursuit. Avoidants run not because they don't care, but because their ego has convinced them they are safer in control. They want to prove to themselves that they don't need intimacy, that they're above emotional dependency. And when you chase, you reinforce the illusion. Every unanswered call, every long text, every attempt to fix them says to their subconscious, I am still in control. I can withhold love, and you'll still come running. That is not love. That is power play. And here's the brutal reality. You will never humble an avoidant by giving them more of what feeds their arrogance. But silence does something devastating to that ego. Silence is not passive. Silence is not weak. Silence is surgical. It cuts off the oxygen their ego breathes. Because an avoidant's confidence isn't rooted in strength. It's rooted in the assumption that you'll never leave. Their ego whispers, no matter how far I run, they'll always be there. The moment you stop chasing, that whisper turns into doubt. That doubt becomes discomfort. That discomfort grows into fear, and that fear humbles them. Now, let's go deeper, because this isn't just about tactics. This is about psychology. The ego is addicted to validation. It craves being right. It craves being superior. And when someone is avoidant, their entire strategy for survival is built on maintaining that superiority. I don't need you. You need me. That's the story they run. But what happens when you stop playing that role? What happens when you no longer feed their illusion? You disrupt the very foundation of their identity. For the first time, they have to confront the possibility that maybe, just maybe, they aren't in control. And that realization, that's humility. Think about this. If you've ever seen someone who's lived their life entitled, always being catered to, suddenly face rejection, you know how shocking it is for them. It shakes them to their core. Why? Because their ego was never built to handle that moment. It was built to avoid it. Avoidants are the same. They spend their lives outrunning intimacy, but they've also built a secret safety net, the belief that the other person will always chase. When you tear that safety net away, you humble them. You force them to stand on ground they've never walked before, and they don't know how to balance there. This is why silence is more powerful than confrontation. You can argue, cry, explain, demand, and their ego will twist it to keep them safe. But when you withdraw, when you stop speaking, the ego has nothing to work with. There are no words to manipulate, no emotions to deflect, only silence. And silence is deafening to someone who has built their world on control. Here's the part most people don't realize. Humbling isn't about revenge. It's not about punishing them. It's about shifting the dynamic so the truth finally surfaces. Because deep down, avoidants do feel. They do crave connection. They just bury it under layers of pride and fear. By removing your energy, you strip away the illusion. And when the illusion collapses, they are left face with the one thing they've always avoided, their own heart. And here's the beauty of it. When you stop feeding the ego, something profound happens. The heart begins to stir. The pride begins to crack. The silence, which once felt like power to them, now feels like loss. And that loss humbles them into seeing what they've taken for granted. This is the moment their walls begin to shake. This is the moment humility enters. And humility, unlike arrogance, drives a person to pursue instead of push away. So don't misunderstand silence. Don't see it as weakness. Don't see it as doing nothing. Silence is an action. It is a decision. It is you reclaiming your dignity, your energy, your worth. It is you refusing to be another servant to their ego. And when you take that stand, You teach the avoidant something no one else ever has. Love is not found in control. It's found in humility. Remember this, when you break their ego with silence, you don't just humble the avoidant, you free yourself from the illusion that their power was ever real. And the moment you stop feeding their ego is the moment they start running back toward you. We've been taught to believe that avoidants are the most independent people in the world. They walk away, they detach, they disappear, and you're left thinking, wow, this person really doesn't need anyone. That's the illusion. That's the mask. And here's the paradox. Avoidants are not as independent as they appear. Their so-called freedom is built on you still being there. Their so-called strength is built on the assumption that they can always return when they want. The moment you step back, the moment you distance yourself, something happens they never planned for. You expose the one thing they don't want anyone to see: their dependency. They don't depend on closeness, but they depend on control. They depend on knowing you're orbiting around them like a planet around the sun. That's their source of comfort. That's their hidden anchor. And when you step away, you cut that anchor loose. Suddenly, their world tilts. Suddenly, the balance they've lived by no longer holds. Think about it. Real independence is tested in the absence of safety nets. And when you pull away, the avoidant finally faces their reality. Their independence isn't real, it's conditional. It only exists when you're still nearby, carrying the weight of the connection. Without you, without the certainty that you'll always be there, their independence transforms into isolation. And isolation is terrifying, even for someone who swears they don't need intimacy. Here's where it gets deep. Human beings are wired for connection. That's not philosophy, that's biology. Neuroscience shows us that our brains light up when we experience rejection the same way they light up when we experience physical pain. The avoidant is no exception. They've just numbed themselves so well that they don't feel it immediately. But make no mistake, distance is not neutral to them. Distance is disruptive. And over time, that disruption cracks the story they've been telling themselves. At first, they'll posture. They'll tell themselves, good, I wanted this space. I needed this space. But as the days stretch into weeks, something inside them shifts. They start to notice the silence. They start to notice that the texts aren't coming, that the door they always assumed was open has closed. And in that silence, their dependency begins to reveal itself. It whispers in their mind late at night, when distraction fades. It shows up in the unease they feel when they scroll their phone and see your absence. That's the hidden dependency you never see when you're chasing. It only reveals itself when you step away. This is why distance is powerful. Distance exposes the truth. When you stay close, they can keep up the illusion that they don't need you. But when you withdraw, when you create space, you become the mirror they cannot escape. That mirror forces them to confront the reality that you mattered more than they allowed themselves to admit. And here's something powerful. Avoidance isn't about lacking feelings. It's about fearing them. The more they feel, the more they avoid. So when you distance yourself, they aren't relieved. They're unsettled. They're thrown into an emotional paradox. I wanted freedom, but why does it feel like loss? I wanted space, but why does it feel like emptiness? That paradox humbles them. It destabilizes their arrogance and forces them to reckon with the truth. They aren't as detached as they pretended. Philosophically, this is the human struggle. We all build walls to protect ourselves, but walls don't just keep pain out, they keep love out too. And when love is gone, when presence is gone, when connection is gone, we feel the cost. The avoidant is no different. Distance strips them of their safety net and shows them that all along, the wall they thought was strength was really weakness. Because true strength is not the ability to run away, it's the ability to stay. So if you want to humble the avoidant, you don't do it by shouting louder or proving your worth. You do it by withdrawing your energy, by giving them the very thing they thought they wanted: space. And when that space stretches longer than they ever anticipated, they start to feel the hunger for connection. They start to feel the emptiness their ego couldn't protect them from. And that hunger, that emptiness, becomes the proof that they were never truly independent. They were dependent all along. And here's the empowering part. You don't have to chase to reveal this truth. You don't have to beg. You don't have to play games. All you have to do is step back and allow their own psychology to do the work. Because the deeper they go into that distance, the louder the truth becomes. They need you more than they admit. They always did. So don't ever mistake their silence as power. Don't ever assume their distance means freedom. No, their distance is the stage where their dependency finally reveals itself. And the one who creates that stage is you. Remember, this distance isn't abandonment. Distance is revelation. It reveals the truth they've spent their entire life running from. And once they see it, once they feel it, that's when the chase begins. Every avoidant relationship is built on a pattern. It's the same cycle over and over again. They pull away and you chase. They shut down and you try harder. They withhold and you pour in more. That cycle is their game. And every time you participate, you reinforce their belief that they are in control. This is the dance they count on to keep their ego intact. But the truth is this: when you step out of the dance, when you stop playing, you break the game. And when the game breaks, so does their illusion of control. Think about it. An avoidant doesn't consciously wake up saying, "I'm going to manipulate this person today." No, it's deeper than that. It's unconscious conditioning. It's the story they've told themselves since childhood. If I push people away, the ones who care will prove it by chasing. They've rehearsed this script so many times that they don't even realize they're playing it out. But the moment you stop playing your part, the moment you refuse to read your lines, the script collapses. And when the script collapses, the ego begins to crumble. That collapse is what humbles them. Let's take this to a psychological level. Every game of power depends on two participants, the one who sets the rules and the one who agrees to play by them. Avoidants set the rules by withdrawing. Your role in their mind is to fill the silence, to bridge the gap, to prove your loyalty. That's how they maintain control. But when you don't respond the way they expect, when you don't run after them, you've broken the contract. You've told their subconscious, "This game doesn't work on me anymore." And in that moment, you create a rupture in their system. It forces them to confront something they've spent their whole life avoiding, the possibility that love doesn't bend to their control. Now, here's what's fascinating. The avoidant is addicted to predictability. They don't trust intimacy, but they trust the game. They trust that if they retreat, you will advance. That predictability gives them comfort. It's how they manage their fear of closeness. But when you don't advance, when you step back instead, you introduce unpredictability into their world. And unpredictability terrifies them because it forces them to face the unknown. It forces them to face you not as someone they control, but as someone they could actually lose. That's the moment humility enters. Philosophically, this is about disrupting patterns. Life is full of invisible contracts, agreements we make without realizing it. And the avoidant contract is simple: I will withdraw and you will chase. But you have the power to tear that contract up. You have the power to say, "I will not validate this story anymore." And when you do, you don't just humble them. You free yourself. You free yourself from a cycle that keeps you small, that keeps you begging, that keeps you trapped in proving your worth to someone who isn't showing up. Let me make this crystal clear. Humbling is not about shaming. It's not about punishing. It's about awakening. When you refuse to play the game, you awaken them to a reality they've never faced. Their strategies don't work anymore. Their defenses don't protect them anymore. And underneath all those defenses is a human being who is terrified of love, but who desperately needs it. By refusing to chase, you pull back the mask. You don't expose them with words, you expose them with your absence. And here's what happens next. They start to panic. At first, they may double down. They may withdraw even further, testing if you'll eventually break and chase. But as time goes on, the panic grows. The silence gets louder, the control slips away, and eventually, they are forced to step into the one thing they've avoided their whole life: vulnerability. And vulnerability is the seed of humility. It's the soil where genuine pursuit is born. This is why refusing to play the game is so powerful. Because when you stop, the game doesn't just end, it transforms. It turns into a mirror that reflects their own fear back at them. It forces them to ask questions they've avoided for years. Why didn't they chase? Why didn't they fight for me? Do I actually matter to them? Have I lost something valuable? And in those questions, humility grows. That's the crack in the ego that lets love seep in. So don't underestimate your power. You don't need to argue an avoidant. You don't need to beg them to see your worth. You don't need to explain your value. Your silence, your refusal, your detachment does all the work. It rewrites the script. It dismantles the illusion. And it humbles them in a way no words ever could. Remember this: games only exist when both players agree to play. When you stop moving to their rhythm, when you stop dancing to their music, the game ends. And when the game ends, the avoidant is left standing in silence, forced to face themselves. The avoidant lives under the illusion of power. They pull back and you chase. They go silent and you fill the silence. They disappear and you wait. That's their leverage. Their sense of power doesn't come from strength. It comes from your availability. As long as you're always there, always accessible, always ready to answer, they believe they hold the upper hand. But the instant you become unavailable, the entire dynamic shifts. The ground beneath them begins to shake, because suddenly they are no longer the one in control. You are. Let me explain why. Power in relationships is never about who talks louder or who withdraws faster. Power is about who is willing to walk away. The avoidant has always relied on the belief that you won't. That no matter how much they pull back, you'll always stretch further to close the gap. But when you stop, when you step back, when you become unavailable, you flip the script. Because now, for the first time, they're the one dealing with uncertainty. They're the one feeling the absence. They're the one asking questions they can't answer. And here's the paradox: the moment you stop being accessible is the moment they start to value your presence. Human beings, all of us, are wired to take for granted what is always available. We ignore the water until the well runs dry. We dismiss the warmth until the fire goes out. The avoidant is no different. When you're always there, they can tell themselves they don't need you. But when you remove that certainty, when you create scarcity, their mind flips. What they once ignored, they now obsess over. What they once dismissed, they now crave. Scarcity humbles the avoidant faster than any argument ever could. Think about this on a psychological level. The ego hates losing power. It thrives on certainty and control. When you become unavailable, you deny the avoidance ego the very fuel it needs. Suddenly, the story they've lived by, "I'm the one in charge, I'm the one who decides," is shattered. And in its place grows a new story. What if I'm the one being left behind? What if I'm the one losing? That shift is massive. It humbles them. It forces them to experience the same vulnerability they've spent their entire life avoiding. This is not about playing games. This is not about manipulation. This is about reclaiming your dignity. Because here's the truth: you were never powerless. You just forgot your power because you kept giving it away. Every time you chased, every time you answered immediately, every time you over-explained, you handed them the leverage. But the second you stop, the second you hold back, the second you become unavailable, you remember something vital: your presence is valuable. Your energy is valuable. Your love is valuable. And anything valuable becomes more powerful the moment it's not freely accessible. Philosophically, this is about the law of value. What is always present becomes invisible. What is scarce becomes precious. This is why the avoidant, who once seemed indifferent, suddenly feels desperate when you step back. They're not just missing you. They're missing the certainty, the validation, the safety net they built out of your availability. And that absence humbles them because it confronts them with a truth they can't ignore. You're not someone who can be taken for granted. At first, they may resist it. They may pretend they don't notice. They may even double down on the illusion of indifference. But make no mistake, they notice. They feel it. They feel it in the silence. They feel it in the absence of your energy. They feel it in the weight of what's no longer there. And the longer you hold that position, the more the power dynamic shifts. The more they realize that the one who was once available on demand is now the one they must pursue. This is why unavailability is humbling. It forces the avoidant to cross into territory they've avoided their whole life. The territory of effort, of pursuit, of vulnerability. It forces them to confront the fact that the power they thought was permanent was actually borrowed, and it was borrowed from you. And once you take it back, the entire game changes. So don't underestimate the strength of becoming unavailable. Don't mistake it for weakness or fear. It is the opposite. It is the clearest signal of power you can send, because when you become unavailable, you're not punishing them. You're elevating yourself. You're declaring, my energy is not free. My love is not endless. My presence is not guaranteed. And that declaration humbles them in a way that words never could. Remember this, power doesn't belong to the one who withdraws first. It belongs to the one who is willing to stay gone. And the moment you choose unavailability is the moment you remind both them and yourself of the truth. You were the power all along. Every avoidant lives inside a fantasy. The fantasy is simple, but powerful. No matter how far I pull away, no matter how cold I become, no matter how many walls I build, you'll still be there when I decide to come back. That's the story running in their mind. It's not just a belief. It's a safety net. It keeps them feeling untouchable. It keeps them from having to face their own vulnerability. As long as they believe you'll never truly walk away, they can maintain the illusion that they're the ones in control. But here's the twist. That fantasy only works as long as you play your role in it. The moment you step out of the script, the moment you stop chasing, stop waiting, stop rescuing, their fantasy shatters. And what replaces it? Fear, not ordinary fear, existential fear. The kind that shakes a person to their core because it forces them to confront the one truth they've avoided their whole life. Control was never real. Think about it. Control in relationships is an illusion. No one owns another person. No one can guarantee love forever. The only real power you have is in how you show up, how you give, how you choose. But avoidants cling to the illusion that by staying distant, they hold the reins. That by staying detached, they're immune from loss. Yet loss isn't prevented by control. It's invited by it. Because the more they pull away, the closer they bring themselves to losing the very thing they thought was secure. And here's where it gets fascinating. Psychologically, the avoidant mind feeds on distance. It tells them, if I create space, I'll feel safe. But that same distance eventually turns into a void. And the human brain does not tolerate voids for long. The same silence that once felt like power begins to feel like absence. The absence grows into doubt. Doubt becomes anxiety. Anxiety becomes fear. And fear humbles even the most prideful heart. This is why your silence, your detachment, your refusal to play the game is so powerful. It flips the script inside their mind. What once felt like security now feels like danger. What once felt like control now feels like slipping. Suddenly, the avoidant who thought they were running the show is up at night wondering, did I push too far? Did I lose them for good? What if they've moved on? That's the moment fear creeps in. That's the moment their fantasy collapses. But let's take it deeper. Philosophically, control is the ego's ultimate drug. It feeds the illusion of safety while quietly creating fragility. because the more tightly you grip control, the more terrified you become of losing it. For the avoidant, control isn't strength. It's dependency in disguise. They are dependent on you staying predictable, on you staying available, on you always being the one to close the gap. When you stop, when you break the pattern, you rip away their drug. And without that drug, they are forced to confront the raw truth. They need you more than they ever admitted. At first, they may deny it. They may cling even harder to their old behaviors. But inside, something begins to unravel. The fantasy no longer holds. The fear grows louder. And that fear is what drives them to act. Because the mind will do anything to escape fear. It will chase. It will reach out. It will risk vulnerability if it means quieting that storm inside. And here's the empowering part for you. You don't have to argue your worth. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to break yourself to show them love. All you have to do is step back and let their own fear reveal the truth. Because when their fantasy crumbles, when control turns into fear of loss, the pursuit begins. Not because you forced it, not because you begged for it, but because they finally see reality clearly. You are not a guarantee. You are not permanent unless they choose to show up. This is the essence of humbling, not punishment, not revenge, but reality exposing itself. The fantasy was always a lie. The control was always borrowed. And fear of losing you is what finally cuts through the layers of pride and defense. It brings them face to face with the truth they couldn't avoid forever. That love is not a game of control. It's a choice of commitment. So don't ever underestimate the power of stepping back. Don't ever think silence is weak or detachment is passive. It is the loudest message you can send. Because when you remove yourself, you take away their fantasy. And when the fantasy collapses, fear takes over. And that fear is what drives the avoidant to do the very thing they swore they'd never do. Come running back. Remember this, their fantasy of control is fragile, but your silence is unshakable. And the moment you hold your ground, their fantasy dissolves into fear. And fear, more than anything else, is what makes the avoidant finally move. When you truly understand the psychology of an avoidant, you realize that the moment of humbling is not about crushing them. It's about creating a reality they can no longer escape. An avoidant survives by constructing illusions. Illusions of independence, illusions of superiority, illusions that they do not need you or anyone else. But when your actions strip away the false armor, when you show them that you will not chase, will not beg, will not orbit around their gravitational pull, suddenly the illusion collapses. And the collapse of illusion is the first spark of transformation. Think about it. Avoidants thrive on control, not because they're strong, but because they are terrified of losing it. Control is their shield against vulnerability. They pull back, they run, they create distance because deep inside, connection feels overwhelming. And when someone continues to pursue them, plead with them, or orbit around them, they feel validated in their illusion. They feel untouchable. But when you flip the script and refuse to play by their rules, their sense of control disintegrates. That's what humbles them. It forces them to realize that they are not as powerful, not as detached, not as in control as they believed. And here's the paradox. When the avoidant is humbled, when their illusion of invincibility is shattered, they don't become weaker. They actually get closer to becoming real, to becoming authentic, to becoming human again. Because all this time, their distance was never about rejecting love. It was about fearing it. Their arrogance was a mask for insecurity. Their coldness was armor for wounds they never healed. So, when you refuse to bend to their push-pull dance, you are not punishing them. You are awakening them. Now, don't confuse humbling with shaming. This is not about revenge or dominance. Humbling is not you standing above them. It's you standing firm within yourself. It's the refusal to give your power away. It's the silent message that says, I am whole with or without you. I will not shrink to fit your fear. I will not beg to soothe your ego. That kind of strength, that kind of unshakable posture forces the avoidant to see what they've been blind to all along, that the connection they thought they could walk away from is not replaceable, not dismissible, not forgettable. The humbled avoidant begins to feel something they cannot outrun: loss. Not loss in the sense of punishment, but loss in the sense of awakening to value. They realize the one thing they believed they could discard is the one thing that grounded them, the one thing that challenged their patterns, the one thing that made them feel seen. And here's the truth: they can run from closeness, but they cannot run from the memory of someone who stood tall in self-respect. That memory burns deeper than any chase, louder than any plea. This is where you begin to see the shift. The avoidant, who once seemed cold, begins to reach out. The one who ran now circles back. Why? Because what humbles them also heals them. The confrontation with reality. The reality that they are not immune to love, not immune to longing, not immune to needing someone, brings them face to face with their humanity. And when they face their humanity, the mask starts to crack. But here's the critical part: if you humble them, you cannot collapse at the first sign of their return. Too many people make the mistake of celebrating too soon, of letting the avoidant re-enter without accountability. No, humbling them is not just about creating the shift. It's about sustaining it. It's about maintaining the boundaries, the standards, the unwavering posture that made them come back in the first place. Because if you drop those standards, the avoidant will retreat again into illusion. But if you remain steady, they will keep coming forward step by step, breaking the cycle they've lived in for years. You humble the avoidant not by fighting their fear, but by refusing to bow to it. You humble them by being so grounded in your worth that their games collapse under their own weight. You humble them by holding up a mirror that shows them their illusion doesn't work anymore. And in that space, something extraordinary happens. They don't just come back running, they come back differently. They come back open, vulnerable, willing to face the one thing they spent their life running from: real love. And that's what I want you to take with you. Humbling is not destruction, it's revelation. It's not about making them small, it's about forcing the truth into the open. When you stand tall in self-respect, you force them to confront the truth of who they are and what they actually want. And when truth breaks illusion, love has a chance to finally step in. So remember this: if you want the avoidant to come back, don't chase, don't collapse, don't beg. Stand so firm in who you are that they are humbled by the very strength they tried to outrun. Because in the end, what truly humbles them is not your silence, it's your power. And once they see that, they will never see you or themselves the same way again.